Okay, so we have our next question, which says message passing system allows processes to communicate with one another without resorting to share data, communicate with one another by resorting to share data, or name the recipient or sender of the message. Okay, so before coming to this question, let me just give you a brief idea about what all these are. So message passing system. Okay, so first of all, in our system we have two types of processes. Okay, two types of processes. Okay, they are either independent processes. What is meant by independent processes means when one process is running in our system, it is running independently of the other processes running in the system. Okay, they are not depending on each other, that's why they are independent processes. Okay, and the next type that we have is cooperating processes, and as the name suggests, it means the execution of one process depends on the other process as well. So basically our main goal is to study about cooperating processes. So now suppose there are so many processes in my system, P1, P2, P3, P4 and so many. Now why we make cooperating processes? So that we can share data. Suppose I have some resource R1 and process P1 and P2 and P3 wants to share this data, then we use cooperating process. For this cooperating process, we use a mechanism which is known as inter-process communication, IPC. Okay, and for this IPC we have two methods that we use. One is shared memory and the other is message passing. Let me just explain you one more time. Suppose I have many processes in my system, okay, and they are running concurrently, means they are running parallelly. Okay, they want to share a data. So how they will know that one process is sharing their data? So there must be some way of communication between these processes. Okay, and that mechanism is known as inter-process communication. Okay, and we have two methods for that, and one is shared memory and the next one is message passing. Here they are talking about the message passing system allows processes to. Okay, and in this given diagram, this one is shared memory method and this one is message passing. As you can see in the diagram, what we do is, suppose a process A is running process A is running and it is executing some instructions, and meanwhile it is changing some values on R1. So what it will do, it will give all the information on this shared memory that I have used this data and I have updated these values and so on. Okay, now process B, which is also sharing this data R1, it will take that updated data from the shared memory and then start its execution. Okay, so how process, so basically we are actually talking about the communication between the processes. That's the main key here. Okay, we are basically talking about the communication between the processes. Okay, so here in when process A and B wants to communicate with each other, how they are communicating, they are using a shared memory over here. Okay, in which they dump their data which they wants to share. Okay, in message passing it is totally opposite. They don't use any shared data. How they communicate? They communicate through communication link. Okay, or here in diagram you can see process A is running some data. So what it will do, it after its execution, it will tell the kernel, okay, that I have done these updations. Now kernel has the responsibility when process B is running the same type, wants to execute the same type of data, then kernel will hold the responsibility and it will tell the process B that now the updated value is this and you have to use this one. So basically here in message passing, communication with one another without resorting to shared data. This option is right. Resorting means dependency. There is no dependency on the shared data. They are communicating using the communication link, or here in this case kernel is here, communication holding the communication between process A and B. Okay, so in message passing there is no use of shared data, while in shared memory we use the shared memory for the communication between the two processes. C option is clearly wrong and D is also clearly wrong, because we are talking about the communication here. This is one of the communication method between the processes which are cooperating. So we have next question, which says, in a time sharing operating system, when the time slot given to a process is completed, the process goes from the running state to the blocked state, ready state, suspended state, or the terminated state. So this question is asked from the process state transition diagram, and they are talking about the time sharing operating system. It means the time quanta is given, like round robin scheduling. Okay, so they are saying when the time slot given to a process is completed, the process goes from the running state. Okay, so let's suppose there are process P1, P2 and P3, and time quanta is 3 ns microsecond or anything. Then P1 will execute for 3 time unit, and then P2 will come. So when P2 will come, only one process at a time can occupy the CPU. So for that time being, where this P1 will reside? That is the question. Okay, so let's remember our process state diagram. Suppose I have a process in new state, then it will come to the ready state. When it will get the CPU for the execution, then it will come to the running state. And suppose there is no time quanta, any priority or any IO interrupt, then it will successfully terminate. If it has no other demand and it is executing successfully without any interrupt, then it will go to the terminate state. Okay, so basically you can say this is the final state. Okay, now suppose a higher priority process has come, so at that time any process here in the running state will go back to the ready state. Okay, so basically any high priority, due to priority issue also, my running process can come back to the ready queue. Or if there is any time quanta, due to the time quanta, like process P2 has come now after 3 quanta, so P1 will go to the ready state. So obviously answer is ready state, not terminated state, because terminated state is the final state when the process has finally executed. Now let's see what is blocked state. When a process which is in running state request for IO, then it goes to the block state. Okay, block, or you can also say wait state. So this is not the answer. Then after block it can go to the ready again. Now what is suspended state? Now all this is happening in our main memory. Now let's suppose a new process has come, and obviously it has to be executed in the main memory, but my main memory does not have sufficient space. So what I will do, if I have any process in the block state, then what can I do? I can shift some process, I can suspend. We use the keyword suspend here. I can suspend any process here, that is known as suspend wait state. Okay, and what it means is it will go to the secondary memory. Okay, and then after that it will be suspend ready when there will be space available. Okay, and it will again resume. Okay, it can actually also again can come back to the suspend ready if it gets suspended. Okay, so suspended state is also not the right answer here. Okay, so ready state is the answer here. So we have next question, which says processes are classified into different groups in shortest jobs scheduling algorithm, round robin scheduling algorithm, priority scheduling algorithm, or multi-level queue scheduling algorithm. Okay, so processes are classified. It means processes are categorized into different groups. Okay, so is it SJF? No. In SJF, what we simply do is, on the basis of the CPU burst, we choose the shortest job. Okay, whichever has the shortest time quanta, we will execute it first. Okay, the shortest job. Again, now next is round robin. In round robin, what we do, we assign a particular time quanta. Let's say it is constant, let's say 3. Then for 3 time quanta, one process will run and then it will switch to another process. Okay, so this is also not the right answer. Third one, priority scheduling algorithm. It is done on the basis of the priority, like you can say like system processes get higher priority than the user processes. Okay, so that's different thing. Now obviously the answer is D. What is multi-level queue? Let's say I have, what we do in multi-level queue, we categorize the processes into different groups, and then on the basis of their priority we schedule them. What I am saying is, let's say I have few system processes. Okay, and I have few interactive processes. Interactive means like you play games and all. We call them interactive processes. And let's say I have few batch processes which needs to be run in the batches. And let's say I have few student processes, student or user processes. Okay, obviously our system processes will get higher priority. Okay, so what we basically do in multi-level queue, we categorize the processes like system processes and different type of processes, and then when they are categorized on the basis of their priority, we execute them. Like I can apply FCFS on this, and I can apply let's say first come first serve FCFS. For the batch also I can assign time quanta. For student I can choose any other priority, let's say, or any other algorithm I can design. Okay, so the answer is D here. So we have next question. Deadlock prevention is a set of methods. Option A says to ensure that at least one of the necessary conditions cannot hold. B option says to ensure that all the necessary conditions do not hold. Next says this different. Okay, it is saying at least one of the necessary condition, and it is saying all the necessary conditions. Okay, we will see what are the conditions. Okay, now C option says to decide if the requested resource for a process have to be given or not. Okay, or to recover from a deadlock. Okay, so do understand this question very carefully. It is very good question. Okay, so basically let's start with the basic. We have four strategies. We have four strategies to solve deadlock problems. Okay, one is deadlock ignorance, deadlock prevention, deadlock avoidance, and fourth one is deadlock detection and recovery. Okay, they are talking about deadlock prevention. Okay, one of the condition. Now they are talking about one of the necessary condition. Now first let's see what are the necessary conditions for the deadlock to not to hold. Okay, so the condition, first condition is mutual exclusion. Next necessary condition is hold and wait. I will explain you. Third one is no preemption. And fourth one is circular wait. So these are the four conditions for the deadlock to occur. What is mutual exclusion? Two processes are not mutually exclusive, means one process can execute other processes instructions, and then deadlock can occur. Okay, hold and wait is one process is holding the resources and waiting for some other resources and is not even releasing them. Non-preemption means a process is not preempting the resources until it get all the resources. Okay, and circular wait is, let's say A is waiting for resource R1. No, this symbol means A1 got R1, and let's say A is waiting for R1, A got R2. Okay, R2 is held by B and B is requesting for R1. So A want B, B is A want what the B is holding, and it is holding the resources which B wants. So it is kind of circular. Let me explain you some other way. What I want to say is, let's say here process A and B. Now A has resource R1, B has resource R2. A is also requesting for R2, B is requesting for R1, and they are not releasing their own resources. So this is the case of deadlock. So this is also known as circular wait. Okay, so these are the 4 conditions, okay, for the deadlock. Now they are saying deadlock prevention. All the 4 methods which I have told you, deadlock prevention is one of the method. They are saying which one of them is right. So in deadlock prevention, what we do is, just imagine, this is the shortcut which I'm telling you. Let's just imagine these 4 conditions as a table with 4 legs, 1, 2, 3 and 4 legs. Okay, so if you break any one leg, okay, so that will help. Even if you solve any one of the problem, it will prevent the deadlock to occur. So A is the answer, to ensure that at least one of the necessary conditions cannot hold. Okay, even if you break any one of the condition out of these 4, it will prevent the deadlock. So A is the right answer. Just do read this question very carefully. Okay, it is just game of words. Okay, you will get it very easily otherwise. So we have next question, which says at a particular time of computation, the value of the counting semaphore is 13. Okay, then 20p operations, 20p, P means wait operations, and wait operations means negative, minus 20. Okay, then 20p means wait operations, and 15v, okay, means signal. So we have 15v means signal operation, and signal means plus 15. Okay, were completed on this semaphore. The resulting value of the semaphore is, so it was 13, then we have applied 20p operations, means 13 minus 20, so it is minus 7, and 15v operation, so plus 15 signal operation. So the answer is 8 here, which is option C. So we have next question, which says memory management technique in which system stores and retrieve data from secondary storage for use in main memory is called fragmentation, paging, mapping, or none of the mentioned. Okay, so we know the answer already, but still let's look at the options one by one. So fragmentation, it is a problem. Okay, in this, memory is broken into small pieces, none of which is big enough to satisfy the next requirement. Okay, so that problem is actually fragmentation. So I do not have enough memory. I have divided already my memory into some chunks, and now none of the chunk is big enough to satisfy the new requirement. So the fragmentation can be categorized into then external fragmentation, internal fragmentation. So it is a different thing. So definitely fragmentation is not the right answer. B is paging. Yes, paging is the right answer. What we do is, even though we do not have enough memory in our main memory, what we do is a part of the process is brought from the secondary memory to the main memory, only that part which is required currently by the user to execute a particular process. That process is known as paging. Okay, and yes, this is the right answer. Now mapping is different thing. Mapping is actually mapping of physical and virtual addresses. So mapping is definitely not the answer. So B is the answer here. So we have next question, which says let the time taken to switch from user mode to kernel mode of execution be T1. So from user mode to kernel mode. Okay, when we switch from user mode to kernel mode, what we do is we use our PCB, process control block. In that, suppose I have registers which I have been using and all the resources which I'm using, so that all those resources will be stored, and PCB will hold the control for all the information. Okay, so and so that when the kernel will be done its work, then it will continue like nothing happened. Okay, so while time taken to switch between two user processes be T2. So user processes be T2. Which of the following is correct? T1 is greater than T2, T1 is equals to T2, T1 is less than T2, or nothing can be said about the relation between T1 and T2. Okay, so from the answer, from the question itself, you can understand few topics here. when we switch from user mode to kernel mode, there is nothing much we have to do. What happen is we will maintain our PCB, process control block, and we maintain it for every process. And when it goes from user mode to kernel mode, after the execution of kernel mode, it will come back to user mode, and they are very fast mostly, so it will take no time to switch. Okay, now when two processes switch, they are actually heavy. A context switch between processes, user processes, is heavy. Why? Because we have to store the processes, all the states, register, etc. to the RAM, because all the resources that a process might be holding may be required by the other process. So what we will do, we will free the resources which is being used by that process, so it will obviously take time. And always remember this point, that the context switch between the processes are heavy, user processes are heavy. Okay, when we switch between the two processes, it is heavy. Kernel mode is different thing, user mode and kernel mode, they are different thing. Okay, and when we do the context switch between the processes, it will be heavy. So obviously T1 will be lesser than T2, because in T2 we have lot to do while doing the switching, and in T1 there's nothing much. We already have maintained our PCB, and few more instructions will be added, and we are good to go. So C is the right option here. So next question that we have is, it is saying every address generated by CPU is divided into two parts. We know that. Okay. And what are those two parts? Frame bit and page number and page offset and frame bit, frame offset and page offset. So answer is B here. It's page number and the page offset. What it means is, I maintain pages for my processes, and that is how CPU works. CPU works with the logical addresses. I divide my processes into pages. What I will do, I have this process, so these numbers will tell my page number, on which particular page number I have to go, and inside this I will have many data bits, so particularly which offset I have to consider. So for that I use page offset. Okay, so answer B here. So we have next question, which says a LRU page replacement is used with 4 page frames and 8 pages. How many page faults will occur with the reference string 0, 1, 7, 2, 3, 2, 7, 1, 0, 3 if the 4 frames are initially empty? So basically they are saying we have only 4 frames and they are initially empty. And which scheme is used? LRU. So least recently used. So when I do not have the data with from this string, a newly string wants to be stored in this frame, I will use or replace the previous string on the basis of LRU. What I'm saying is, I'll explain you. Now initially it is empty. Okay, now when 0 occurs, 0 frame, it is a page fault. Okay, so count is 1. Now again when I entered 1, I have 4 sizes, 4 frame, so I will make 4 spaces for this. Now 0, when 0 comes, it is fresh, so this is page fault. Now 1 comes, this is also page fault. Now I have space for 7, this is also page fault, and 2 is also page fault. So 4 page faults already occurred. Now these 4 are in my memory. Now 3 comes, now I do not have space for 3 and it is not already here, so I have to replace one of these to make space for the 3. Now which one to replace? For that they have given used least recently used. Okay, so how we will do is, look carefully. Now 3 has to be in place of one of them. Which one is last used? Leastly it is used, last recently. Okay, 2 is recently referred, 7 is recently referred, 1. 0 is far away from 3. It was first referred, but it is very soon. So what we will do, I will replace this one. I'm short of words, but you can understand what I'm trying to say. I need to make place for 3. Now I will say which one is least, not least referred, not recently referred. 2 is recently referred, 7 is recently referred, 1 is recently referred, 0 is least recently referred out of 4. So 0 will be replaced. This one is page fault because 3 was not here, so increase the count by 1. Now next is 2. It is a success, a hit. 2 was already here. 7 is already here, so it is also a hit. Now 1 is again a hit, it is already there. Now 0, I have already replaced 0, so 0 is not here. Now I have to see where this 0 will go. I have to replace one of them. So 1 is recently used, I cannot replace 1. 7 is recently used, 7 cannot be replaced. 2 is also. So basically what we will do, I will replace the one which is far away from 0, from this element. So 3 is the one. So what I will do, I will replace 3 with 0. So increase the count by 1. Okay. So okay. Now next is 3. Okay. So what I will do, I'll say which one is least referred. So 0 is very close, 1 is close, 7 is close. So 2 is least close. So 2 will be replaced with 3. So 1. So what is the answer? 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 is the answer here. So B option is right. So we have next question which says a scheduling algorithm assigns priority proportional to the waiting time of a process. Every process starts with the priority 0, means lowest priority. The scheduler re-evaluates the process priority for every t time units and declares next process to be scheduled. If the process have no IO operations and all arrive at time 0, then the scheduler implements which criteria? Is it priority scheduling, round robin scheduling, SJF or FCFS? Okay, so there are few points which you need to look carefully. The first thing is scheduling algorithms is assigning priority on the basis of the waiting time of the process. But then read here that all are arriving at time 0. Okay. Now if all processes are arriving at time 0, how can we say that they are what is the waiting time? Because the waiting time will be 0 for them because they all are arrived at time 0. So we will remove this criteria to give priority to the processes. Now what should be the criteria? They are saying every process starts with priority 0. Now the scheduler re-evaluates the process priority for every t time units. It means after each t time units, it is again checking which process to be rescheduled, and we know in which case we schedule our processes on the basis of time quanta. It's round robin. Okay, basically what is happening, suppose I have 3 processes, process P1, P2 and P3. Their arrival time is 0, 0, 0 and their burst time is, let's say, 7, 8, 3. Okay, and time quanta for after every t time, let's say it's 3. Okay, so what it will do, it has all the 3 processes. What it will do, it will assign it to P0, and after P0, after this time unit, it will again reassign it to P1 and then to P3. And how this is working? This is working exactly like round robin, giving time quanta, and after finishing of that time quanta, it will switch between the processes. Okay, you have to be very careful while solving this kind of question. They are giving priority on the basis of the waiting time, but here they are saying that they all are arriving at time 0. But now when this process when this condition is cancelled, now how we will assign them priority? On the basis of time unit. Okay, and round robin work that way. So we have next question which says which of the following is not typically a benefit of dynamic linking? Okay, so the first option is reduction in overall program execution time, reduction in overall space consumption in memory, reduction in overall space consumption on disk, or reduction in the cost of software updates. Okay, so what is dynamic linking? When we link our data dynamically, not at the runtime, then it is known as dynamic linking. Okay, we do it dynamically during the execution time. All the data is linked during the runtime only. No, so what I want to say is, when you want few resources for the execution of your program, those resources will be allocated to you at the runtime only. Now let's read one by one. They're saying not benefit of. Okay, so reduction in overall program execution time. This is wrong. Why? Because in dynamic linking we are actually linking our data at the runtime. So, and sometimes there are libraries in other files, so it takes time, and it takes time obviously more than static linking. So this is wrong. Reduction in overall program execution time, even it is one of the disadvantage of dynamic linking. The time gets increased. Okay, so reduction in overall space consumption in memory, this is right. Okay, in dynamic linking what we do is we are actually are acquiring our resources during the dynamic time or the execution time, while in static linking what we do, we acquire our resources during the compilation time. So we have our resources already with us, so due to that we are actually consuming our memory, so it takes lot of memory. What? Static linking. But in dynamic linking we are only acquiring them during the runtime. That's why there is less space used. It is one of the advantage. Next is reduction in overall space consumption on disk. This is also right, because we are running our program and linking is done at the runtime, so obviously the space consumption is low in dynamic linking because we are not acquiring our resources beforehand. Now last option says reduction in cost of software updates. This is also right, because in the static what we do, we hold our resources from the very beginning. It increases the cost because for many resources you might would like to use them for other processes as well, but due to the static linking you have to allocate those resources to a particular process, while in dynamic linking you can allocate to them at the runtime, so it actually reduces the cost of the software. So this is also right option. So we have to pick out the wrong one, is not the typically the benefit of dynamic linking. So our option only one is right, and which matches with the option B, so one only is right in this, which is wrong option for the dynamic linking. This is actually the disadvantage of our dynamic linking. Okay, and these are the advantages of our dynamic linking. So we have our next question, which says a thread is usually defined as a lightweight process because an operating system maintains smaller data structure for a thread than for a process. Obviously we know that processes are heavier than the threads. Now in relation to this, which of the following statement is correct? So we have to pick out the correct option. Okay, so the first option says OS maintains only scheduling and accounting information for each thread. OS maintains only CPU registers for each thread. OS does not maintain virtual memory state for each thread, or OS does not maintain a separate stack for each thread. Okay, always remember one thing, that OS on threads basic structure, it maintains only two things. Okay, you can answer a lot of questions on basis of this. So OS basically maintains two things on the basic structure. First is CPU register state, okay, and the second one is stack space. Okay, also it stores the scheduling informations, also accounting informations also, but these are secondaries, but these two are basic things. Okay, so now let's come to the question. First option says OS maintains only scheduling and accounting information for each thread. Because of this only word, this option is wrong. It also maintains scheduling and accounting information for each thread, but not only, it also maintains CPU register state and the stack space. Okay, so first option is wrong. OS maintains only CPU register for each thread. Obviously this is also wrong. Now next is OS does not maintain virtual memory state for each thread. This is right. Why? Because virtual memory is actually concerned with the processes, not with the threads. Okay, virtual memory is concerned with the processes, not with the threads. And third option is right. OS does not maintain virtual memory state for each thread. Now the next option says OS does not maintain a separate stack for each thread. This is right because sometimes there are shared data, so that's why. Okay, so you must be thinking about the TLB, page table, and all these things. They are actually shared. Why? Because there are many processes which can belong to the same TLB and the page table. Okay, so that's why they are shared, they are not separate. Okay, that's why. So only C option is right here. Virtual memory is actually concerned with our processes only, not with the threads. Threads are very lightweighted. So we have our next question, which says in multi-level feedback scheduling. So first statement is starvation of lower priority processes can be avoided. And second statement is processes cannot be moved into the upper queues. Okay. So for this question, you have to just remember one thing. What is multi-level feedback scheduling? Okay. So there are two types of scheduling. First one actually was multi-level queue scheduling, and there were few disadvantages like starvation. What I want to say is, like, suppose I have what we do in multi-level queuing scheduling algorithms is we categorize the processes and we group them together and form different queues, like says, like I have few system processes, and let's say I have few batch processes. What I'm doing is I am categorizing processes on the basis of their type. Okay, and let's say I have few user processes, or you can say interactive processes. Okay, so there are many queues, and CPU will execute them on the basis of their priority. Like if system processes have higher priority, then these processes will be executed first, and then only these processes will be executed. But here the chances of starvation was there. Why? Because obviously system processes have higher priority and only they will get scheduled. Every time they ask for CPU, they will get it, and these will starve. So the problem here was starvation. So after that, a new updation came, which was multi-level feedback scheduling. In this, what happens is when there are many queues of the processes, what we do is after some time, this queue will move upward, okay, and then upward after some time, and then upward, and then finally it will get CPU for its execution. So basically there is no case of starvation. So there is no starvation in multi-level feedback queue. Okay, also they are also categorized on the basis of their priority. Let's say in the above, higher priority processes are there, and in the lower one, lower priority processes are there. Okay, so what will happen, my queue will move upward. It depends on the implementation, how they are implementing it, but the case is that they will move upward. They will get their priority changed, and when they will reach to the highest priority state, they will get their CPU for the execution. That's why there is no starvation, and the priorities are categorized. So when some higher priority process is running, no lower priority process can run, and also this cannot come here when a higher priority process is also already assigned. Okay, so the first statement says starvation in multi-level feedback scheduling. The scheduling algorithm which I have explained you later, that was multi-level feedback scheduling, and they are saying starvation of lower priority processes can be avoided. Yes, we have just seen there is no starvation because everyone is getting their chance after some time. Now processes cannot be moved into the upper queues. Yes, this is also right because they are already categorized on the basis of their priorities. When they will get higher priority, they will get executed. So both of the options are right. Okay, so which is true? S1 is true and S2 is true. So B option is right here. Okay, so we have our next question, which says message passing system allows processes to communicate with one another without resorting to shared data, communicate with one another by resorting to shared data, share data or name the recipient or sender of the message. Okay, so before coming to this question, let me just give you a brief idea about what all these are. So message passing system. Okay, so first of all, in our system we have two types of processes. Okay, two types of processes. Okay, they are either independent processes. What is meant by independent processes means when one process is running in our system, it is running independently of the other processes running in the system. Okay, they are not depending on each other, that's why they are independent processes. Okay, and the next type that we have is cooperating processes. And as the name suggests, it means the execution of one process depends on the other process as well. So basically our main goal is to study about cooperating processes. So now suppose there are so many processes in my system, P1, P2, P3, P4 and so many. Now why we make cooperating processes? So that we can share data. Suppose I have some resource R1 and process P1 and P2 and P3 wants to share this data, then we use cooperating process. For this cooperating process, we use a mechanism which is known as inter-process communication, IPC. Okay, and for this IPC we have two methods that we use. One is shared memory and the other is message passing. Let me just explain you one more time. Suppose I have many processes in my system, okay, and they are running concurrently, means they are running parallelly. Okay, they want to share a data. So how they will know that one process is sharing their data? So there must be some way of communication between these processes. Okay, and that mechanism is known as inter-process communication. Okay, and we have two methods for that, and one is shared memory and the next one is message passing. Here they are talking about the message passing system, allows processes to. Okay, and in this given diagram, this one is shared memory method and this one is message passing. As you can see in the diagram, what we do is, suppose a process A is running process A is running and it is executing some instructions, and meanwhile it is changing some values on R1. So what it will do, it will give all the information on this shared memory, that I have used this data and I have updated these values and so on. Okay, now process B, which is also sharing this data R1, it will take that updated data from the shared memory and then start its execution. Okay, so how process, so basically we are actually talking about the communication between the processes. That's the main key here. Okay, we are basically talking about the communication between the processes. Okay, so here in when process A and B wants to communicate with each other, how they are communicating, they are using a shared memory over here. Okay, in which they dump their data which they wants to share. Okay, in message passing it is totally opposite. They don't use any shared data. How they communicate? They communicate through communication link. Okay, or here in diagram you can see process A is running some data. So what it will do, it after its execution, it will tell the kernel, okay, that I have done these updations. Now kernel has the responsibility when process B is running the same type, wants to execute the same type of data, then kernel will hold the responsibility and it will tell the process B that now the updated value is this and you have to use this one. So basically here in message passing, communication with one another without resorting to shared data. This option is right. Resorting means dependency. There is no dependency on the shared data. They are communicating using the communication link, or here in this case kernel is here communication holding the communication between process A and B. Okay, so in message passing there is no use of shared data, while in shared memory we use the shared memory for the communication between the two processes. C option is clearly wrong and D is also clearly wrong, because we are talking about the communication here. This is one of the communication method between the processes which are cooperating. So we have our next question. Match the following for operating system techniques with the most appropriate advantage. Okay. So here few terms are given and their advantages are given. Okay. So always remember for these kind of question, always when these things are given, always try to remember their advantages and their definitions. Okay. So that way you can match the best way. Now first one is spooling. Spooling means when I want to use my any input output device for many processes. Okay, let's say I want to use my printer for many processes. When one process is not running, other process should get the printer and it should use it. So this is known as spooling process, and this matches with the third option here, overlapping IO and computations. Okay, what we do is we give the ALU and the control over the input output devices to the many processes. Okay, now next one is multi-programming. We know why we do multi-programming: to increase the efficiency of our CPU. It deals with the efficiency. So let's read out the options. So the first option says allow several jobs in the memory to improve CPU utilization. I think it matches best with this. So let's read out the others. Access to shared resources among geographically dispersed computers in a transparent. No, this is not. And fourth one says allows many users to share a computer simultaneously by switching processors frequently. No, this is not. This is time sharing. So B option matches with the first option. Allows several jobs in memory to improve the CPU utilization or the CPU efficiency. Okay, so the third option is time sharing. Obviously C is matching with the option 4, allows many users to share a computer simultaneously by switching processor frequently. This comes under time sharing. Okay, so obviously D matches with this. You already know a lot about the distributed computing, so whenever you know few things like picking out the D was very easy. That for the D option, obviously 2 is correct. For C, you know what is time sharing when the processor is shared among different users. So for C also, let's say you know what is the answer, right? So you can match with the options given. Okay, you don't need to know all these terms, but just try to remember the things which you already know very well. Okay, so that way D is second, C is 4. D is second, C is 4, and A is 3. A matches with the 3 and B matches with the 1. So B option is right here. So this is how you can do these kind of questions. Okay, so we have our next question which says in dash allocation method for disk block allocation in a file system, insertion and deletion of the blocks in a file is easy. For index technique, linked technique, contiguous technique, or the bitmap technique. Okay, so they are talking about that basically we have to apply two operations here, insertions and deletions. These two operations must be efficient. Okay, for the allocation method for disk allocation of the files in our disks. Okay, so which of the method is good for that when the operations are only insertion and deletion? Okay, so let's look one by one. So first one is indexed. Now for index we have to maintain block index, okay, for each file which is being stored. So actually it is an overhead, because for every insertion and deletion you have to update this. Okay, and this is overhead. That's why this is not a good technique when it comes to insertion and deletion. It is good when you are applying searching. If the operation would have been searching of the files, then index would be most appropriate answer. But here I want to perform insertion and deletion most efficiently, so for that index is not a good option. Okay, so the next one is linked. In the linked list, what we do is we link the data, and the data can be stored anywhere in the disk, and any size of data it can be updated later. So it is a good thing about this. So I think insertion and deletion is good for the linked one. Why? Because I don't need to update it anywhere. There is no internal and external fragmentation problem. There is no problem. Only traversing is bad for the linked list, because you cannot access them directly. right? So traversing is not good here, but they are not talking about only insertion and deletion problem. So linked is best option seems here. So C option says contiguous. Contiguous, in the contiguous, what we do is we allocate our whole file in the disk contiguously, but the problem here is fragmentation problem, both internal and external fragmentation, and they both occur while performing the insertion and deletion. So that's why contiguous is also not a good option. For bitmap, what we do is we maintain bits, like say for a particular block I have data, so I will write 1. For a particular block again I have data, so I'll write 1. When there is no data, I'll maintain it as 0 0 1 0. So this is how bitmap is maintained. When I remove a particular data, it will update it to 0. So again, this problem actually, the bitmap technique actually creates the whole problem. Their holes will be created and I cannot allocate them contiguously. That's why bitmap is also not a good technique when it comes to insertion and deletion. Only linked seems the most appropriate answer for the insertion and deletion option. When the operation is searching, index is good. When the access, they are talking about the access, contiguous is good because it is directly you can access it. There is no problem in that, okay? But linked is good when it comes to insertion and deletion. There is nothing to maintain any record or anything, and there is no fragmentation problem. So B seems the most right answer here. So we have our next question, theory question, very easy. So this says dining philosopher's problem is a producer-consumer problem, classical IPC problem, starvation problem, or the synchronization primitive. Okay, so we all know about the dynamic philosopher's problem. It is not a producer-consumer problem. No one is depending on something else. Like in producer-consumer, what we do is producer produces the item and consumer consumes the item. The consumer is depending on the producer. But here nothing like that happens. Okay, this is, yes, a classical IPC problem. It is actually a communication problem. IPC is inter-process communication problem. In this, where several processes are running concurrently and only one process can enter into the critical section. So dynamic philosophy actually gives a solution how processes, when there are limited resources, how they can manage to get the critical section, get into the critical section one by one. So B is the right option here. This is not a starvation problem and not a synchronization primitive. Clearly D option is clearly wrong, and not a starvation problem. Nobody is starved here if we correctly perform our operations here. Okay, you need to read the algorithm for this. You can search. So we have our next question, which says, which of the following page replacement algorithm suffers from the Baladi's anomaly? Anomaly means when something deviates from the standard. Okay, so here they are talking about the page replacement algorithm. So this is a direct question which has been asked, but I'll give you example so that you will understand what exactly the problem is. Okay, so let's say I have string 0 1 2 3 0 1 4 0, let's say 1 2 3 4. Okay, so what happens is, let's say I am giving frames 1 2 3. If I give less frames, then obviously page faults will be more, and when I will give more frames, then obviously the page fault will be lesser. But in Baladi's anomaly, what happens is, in the case of FIFO, directly I'm telling, FIFO is the case where even though you increases the frame size, the page fault does not decreases. Okay, so that's why it is known as anomaly. Okay, and I will tell you with the example how this happens is, let's solve this string. Let's say I am referring to this string, and let's see when I have 3 frame size and when I have 4 frame size, how many page faults are occurring. Okay, so for 0 1 2 0 1 2 3 page faults. For 3 page faults already occurred. For 3 again one more page fault. So now 0, which one will be removed, which comes, it is FIFO. So first in first out, so this one was least. Okay, so this one will be replaced with 0. So how many? 5. Now they are referring to 1. Now this one will be removed. So 1. Okay, now 4. Which one will be removed? Obviously this one, 4. Then 0 I already have hit. 1 is hit. Now 2. Okay, so which one comes the last? which one? So it is 0. Okay, it will be removed with 2. So how many page faults actually occurred? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Okay, now for 3 will be here. Okay, so 8 plus 1 9 and 4 it is a hit. So how many are there page faults? 9 page faults when the frame size is 3. I got 9 page faults. Okay, let's see for when the frame size is 4. Obviously it should be reduced, but let's see. So 0 1 2 3 0 1 2 3 4 page faults already occurred. Okay, now next one is 0 1. 0 1 is hit. 4 page faults already occurred. 0 1 2 3. Now 0 is a hit, 1 is a hit. Now 4. Which one should be removed? Obviously 0 will be removed because it is a FIFO technique. So 4 will come here. Then I have 0. Then this one will be removed. Then I have 1. Then I have 1. Okay, now I have now 2. So this one will be removed. So how many page faults? 4 5 6 7 8. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Okay, now 3. This one will be removed. 1 plus. Now I have 4. So this one will be removed. So 4 5 6 6 7 8 9 10. So here page faults are 10. Even though it should be reduced, but it is increasing. You can also do one thing to make sure that this is right. You can take the same string and solve it using the LRU. In LRU you will see that when the frame size is increased, page faults will be decreased, but in the case of FIFO it is increasing. It is not showing any decrease. Okay, that's why it is known as anomaly, and this is a famous problem which is known as Baladi's anomaly. And why this problem happens in FIFO only? Because of the inherent properties of the FIFO. Okay, so first option is the right here. So we have our next question, which says thrashing occurs when a page fault occurs or when processes on system frequently access pages not in memory. When they talk about memory, it means the main memory, okay, not the secondary memory. The processor needs to be in the main memory for the when they wants to execute. Okay, so the next one says processes on system are in running state or when processes are in waiting state. Okay, so always remember thrashing is the problem, which means when we are actually spending more time in paging than executing our process. Okay, so it is thrashing is the problem of spending more time in paging than execution of the process. Okay, what happens is to increase the degree of multi-programming, what our OS does, it takes so many processes in the main memory and then it schedules them. Now what happens is when processor starts their execution, they will start asking for the pages. Okay, and because there is only limited memory in our main memory, there will be many pages which will not be available in our main memory, so it will refer to secondary memory again and again. So when it happens so many times that so many processes are running, so much time is being wasted for in and out. For what? For swap out and swap in. A lot of time is being wasted because let's say for process P1, what it does is for the limited memory it swap in few pages. Now P2 get scheduled and now P2 also want few pages from its memory. Now what it will do is it will swap out the pages of P1 back into the memory and again swap in for the P2. So what happens is due to this thing of increasing the degree of multi-programming, CPU is executing so many processes and they are referring to the pages which are not in my memory. This problem is known as thrashing, and in this the system completely stops it. What it does is it stops execution because it cannot fulfill the requirement. It is spending more time in paging than the execution. When it will spend more time in paging than the execution, no process will execute actually, and they will only swap in and swap out. This is a problem which is known as thrashing. So processes on system frequently access pages which are not in memory. Page fault is the problem when I ask for a particular page and it is not in main memory. That problem is known as page fault. When so many page faults are combined, that thing is known as thrashing, which is properly defined on two processes, many processes. We are not talking about just one process, where we are talking about many processes. When so many processes are there and they are requesting for the pages which are not in my main memory, and I have to go again and again to the secondary memory and have to swap in and swap out the pages, then the problem of thrashing occurs. So B option is right. When the process on running state, no, this is wrong. When they are already in their main memory, what is the problem? And D is also wrong here. So B is only right here. Okay, don't get confused between A and B. We are talking about the big problem here. Thrashing is a big problem and many processes are involved for this problem. Okay.